Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
July 13, 2020, the Some Good News Department. And we start with that story from the Wall Street Journal, as a federal judge in Miami has dismissed a lawsuit by a Florida doctor who claimed Carnival Cruise Lines used his property, which he says was confiscated by the Cuban government to do business. The lawsuit filed last year was one of the first under the long dormant provision of a U.S. law allowing Americans to pursue legal action against companies doing business in Cuba on property confiscated by the regime of Fidel Castro. The decision could foreshadow the difficulty of plaintiffs for using this provision moving forward. The U.S. District Judge said that the plaintiff's acquisition of the claim to the property and how that squared with the intent of the lawmakers who passed it was lacking. Next up, the Trump administration takes a first step towards returning medical supply chains to the U.S. White House officials have called a $1 million contract with a Virginia corporation potential landmark in returning pharmaceutical manufacture to the United States. Of course, this is after drug companies have run to every other country on earth so that they can manufacture drugs for pennies on the dollar and then sell them for hundreds or thousands of dollars in America. So there's no word on what this is going to do to drug prices, but it's certainly a good thing that supply chains will be returned to the U.S. And if the economics hold all the way through the supply chain, it could be good for Americans going forward. Next up, how tough is the world of gaming? Well, apparently extraordinarily tough, as the makers of Assassin's Creed have hired external firms to investigate internal complaints of misconduct and abuse, as well as those that have surfaced on social media. Entertainment SA said 2 additional senior executives have left the company amid internal investigations into these allegations. The company former head of global HR stepped down as well. Last month, people began to post allegations of harassment and abuse on social media against a number of prominent male Ubisoft employees. Some of these allegations were followed up by internal complaints, and the company has hired an external firm or firms to investigate them. At least one other executive has stepped down. A shakeup at Ubisoft follows a recent outpouring on social media of alleged incidents of sexual harassment and abuse through the $150 billion global gaming industries. So you have an industry largely run by and for teenage and early 20 males. I'm shocked that there would be allegations of abuse and harassment. But finally, this may stop or at least slow down. And finally, Matt Mullenweg, the founder of Automatic, which is the publishing platform of WordPress, says in the New York Times Corner Office column that working from home is good for the environment and good for the economy. 15 years before the coronavirus pandemic abruptly forced most companies to start from work, he relied on a company without an office. The company, which runs the digital platform WordPress and recently acquired Tumblr, built a remote workforce, hiring engineers and designers irrespective of their locations. They currently have over 1,000 employees in 770 companies. This really shows that remote workforce can work. You do have to invest in technology, and you have to train and do things a little different, but it shows that it can work. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Daily Compliance News, which is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. This month on the Compliance Live, I feature Scott Sullivan. Check it out.